Program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of this station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Senior World Radio. Indeed, it's great to be a senior. We like to say seniors are young at heart and twice as smart. Unfortunately, when you get older, sometimes there are a few problems that come along the way, and the good news is there are some people that's willing to help us try to solve some of those problems and work through them, and we've got one of those guys right here in the studio today, a guy that I'm very delighted to have back in the studio with me, Mark Freed. Mark is the president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association. Mark, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back. Always a pleasure to visit with you, Glenn.
Well, it's always a lot of fun to have you here, even though we're talking about a subject that's not fun at all and a problem that continues to grow. In fact, sometimes, experiences really drive it home. I went to a church dinner just last night, and there was a gentleman came walking up to me, and friendly, looked very great, and yet it didn't take long to realize the poor guy had no idea where he was. And his wife was trying to corral him like you would a small child, and you realize there's some diseases that when they hit you, everybody sees and they sympathize, but there's some that's hidden, and Alzheimer's seems to be one of those that so often doesn't get quite the recognition, and yet it is the thing that gets is the thing I think that most of us are really concerned about.
Well, I think that's one of the things we see with the Alzheimer's Association is just how many people really feel like they're alone in this process. They're taking care of a spouse or they're providing care for a mother or father, and they feel very isolated, and that happens quite a bit. You mentioned that situation with a woman and her husband. Spouses become many times even more isolated than others because they tend to withdraw from their support network. They keep their spouse at home more often, and so it becomes one of those things that people just don't see the progression that is taking place. And so one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that folks understand that they're not alone. First and foremost, they can come to us and we talk to them, and we talk them through the situation, help them plan for the progress that will come, and while at the same time connecting them to various kinds of support that are available through our organization, which are all free of charge. And we want to make sure that especially the caregivers understand that they don't have to walk this journey all by themselves. And with that being said, we have more and more folks who are in the early stages of the disease who are coming to us, and we're connecting them with folks who are in the same situation that they're in to help them feel to find the support that they need from someone who knows what it is that they're going through, what it is they're talking about. And so what we do at the Alzheimer's Association is mission driven. It's every day for us. It's 365 days a year, and it's around the clock. And we want more and more folks to first of all admit to themselves that, hey, I have a situation here with my loved one, and I need to find support. And then second of all, don't be afraid to take that step and really connect with the kind of support that is available that'll give them more good days than they would have otherwise.
Mark, I would guess that for the person who is developing Alzheimer's, the early stages of it, knowing they have it and knowing the progression of it probably is more difficult for the person himself than it is in the later stages, when in the later stages it's almost as though they're really not aware there's anything, that there is a problem. It's awfully hard on the spouse or on the caregiver, but it's one of those kind of diseases, the worse it gets, the easier. Is that a fair statement to say? The easier it is for the person?
Well, in some ways, because the frustration level that they find does continue to escalate from what we have learned about the disease, because there's fewer people that interact with them, And so they become even more isolated. Even in a room full of people, there are folks who they don't know how to communicate with the person with the disease, so they almost kind of turn away from them and talk to other people. And so, and as the disease progresses, that becomes more and more so. As far as the how difficult it may be, if they for those who are in the early stages of the disease, it kind of goes both ways. For those who don't want to admit that there are challenges that they're facing, they're afraid. I can certainly understand why someone would be fearful of what am I really dealing with. For those who don't come forward and seek a diagnosis and don't seek some information, then that can be very tough. At the same time, we come across individuals on a regular basis who they feel empowered as they have been willing to come forward, they get diagnosed, and then they start to seek out the help that can be beneficial for them and their family. They feel empowered because many times they're now involved in the actual plan of care. They can sit here and say, look, I'm in this situation. I know how things are going to progress, and I get a chance to be in the planning process, and I get a chance to tell my family now, as things progress, this is what I would prefer. And I want to be in the home longer, or please don't feel overwhelming guilt if it becomes necessary for me to be to go to a senior housing community, for you to make that decision for me, because they then are in that position to be able to express all of their feelings and all of their opinions about what they want. And so it puts them in a position really of empowerment, because they don't have to, the rest of the family is not just simply, well, we need to make this decision and we don't really know how mom would feel about this, but we have to do this. And so it goes both ways. So one of the things we consistently tell folks is that if you or if a loved one that you see is starting to show signs and symptoms, get diagnosed, and at the earlier in the process, because it's going to be better for everyone who is impacted by the disease. Because with this disease, there's 60,000 Oklahomans with Alzheimer's disease. 60,000. That would fill up the Chesapeake Arena more than 3 times. And when you think 60,000, well, that's a lot of people. But then when you start to look at who is actually involved in the plan of care, well, there's 218,000 unpaid family caregivers right here in our state. And so that's a lot of folks who are feeling the impact of the disease on a daily basis. And so, for those 60,000, if they would if every one of those 60,000 would come as early as possible, and they start to have those fears and go through the diagnostic process and be a part of the planning at the front end, we've just seen time after time and heard from those with the disease how it's given them a relief to know that I'm involved and I get a chance to share my wishes with my family, so that they're not trying to guess at how they need to be taking care of me down the road.
I'm talking to Mark Freed, the president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association here in Oklahoma City. Mark, how long have you been involved in working with the Alzheimer's Association?
I started with the association in February of 2005, so just a little over 9 years. Okay. And I started from being the regional director in the Oklahoma City office, and then as my job evolved over time, I'm now the CEO for the Oklahoma chapter. So we have 3 offices right now in our state. We have the headquarters is in Tulsa. We're here in Oklahoma City, and we also have an office right now in Lawton, which we just opened back in November. But actually, I say all that, within the next couple of weeks, we'll be opening a new office in Enid as well. And so what we knew is that we are limited in staff and availability of our staff in the metro areas, because the demand for our services is so great that it's hard for us to get beyond the city limits. And so through a partnership with the Masonic Charitable Foundation, they have provided us with the funding to allow us to expand and accelerate our outreach to the rest of the state. And so our office in Lawton serves the southwest part of the state. The office in Enid will then serve the northwest part of the state. And then the end of that 3-year plan is actually to open another office in McAllister. And so our hope is to do that sometime within the next 10 to 11 months. So
very good coverage for the state of Oklahoma.
Right, and because especially when you're in a metro area like Oklahoma City, and you may be in this situation, and you say, well, we need to find some help for mom because dad's progression is beginning to increase. And so they can simply go on the internet and look for some sort of home health or home care company that can provide some service. Whereas, and that's without even ever coming to the association. But when you get into the areas that are less populated, there's fewer of those opportunities, and so there's fewer of those home health, home care companies in those in the lesser populated parts of the state. And so, and they don't think to contact us a lot of times. So their isolation is driven more by geography and by just lack of available resources in those areas of the state. And so then, like for instance, the McAllister area will really focus in on the entire southeast part of Oklahoma. So we're excited about that progress that we're making, and we know that the demand is going to be beyond. Right now we have one person in our Lawton office, and we know already that that's tough to be able to do the things we want to do effectively, because the demand is just going to be more than what one person can provide.
Mark, we all see this. We run into people who have the problem. We know family members that do. But from your perspective, you've been 9 years in this thing, working with it day in and day out, seeing so many cases. Which way are we going? Are we making any headway, or it seems to me like there's more people, at least more diagnosed with it now than before? And unfortunately, we'll have to take a break in about a minute, but go ahead and give me just a brief minute, and let's come back and talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, I can say this without hesitation, that there has never been as much enthusiasm and optimism within the Alzheimer's research community than there is right now. When I started 9 years ago, everything felt like it was just so far off, and you'd listen to researchers, and it was sort of we're working on things. But now it feels, when you listen to them, they feel like it's imminent. They feel like we are on the cusp within the next few years to have something significant change in the research community that will get us to either a prevention or a significantly increased, a significantly better treatment of the disease. So we're really excited, and I have a lot of details I'd be more than happy to share with you and your listeners.
I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio, visiting this morning with Mark Freed. Mark is the president, CEO of the Alzheimer's Association. One of those diseases that I think all of us kind of worry about every once in a while. When you forget something, you think, oh, my goodness, am I headed down that road? Mark's got some good news for us. We got to take a break, though. We're going to be coming right back, so please hang around. You're going to want to hear the rest of this show today.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline home phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
I've made up my mind.
And welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard. Today I am very honored to have an old friend. I say an old friend because I've been interviewing Mark for 3, 4, 5 years or such a matter, because he deals with the subject that interests me. He's the president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association. And I know as we get older, we seniors a lot of times do a lot of joking. I think I've heard about every joke around. Well, no, I haven't either. There's so many of them about forgetting something. You know, the one I heard the other day, the old boy mentioned to his friend, said, we went out to one of the best restaurants the other night. And the guy said, oh, really? What's the name of it? And he said, oh, you remember that flyer with the stickers on it? And the guy said, you mean Rose? And he said, oh, yeah. Hey, Rose, what was that restaurant we went to the other night? Well, you know, we all have those forgetful moments sometime, and we think, oh, my goodness, here I go, dementia's ahead of me. There's a difference in forgetfulness, or what's the terminology to be used, and when does a person begin to realize, hey, maybe there's something that I need to pay more attention to, or a family member particularly says, Dad's really in need of a little bit of help.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. First and foremost, people need to understand that Alzheimer's is not a part of normal aging. It is not just simply something that happens to folks as we get as we get older. It is a disease of the brain. It causes atrophy of the brain. Brain cells die, and the nerve cells actually tangle up on themselves and curl up into balls, basically. And so the brain doesn't function the way that it is supposed, that it's designed to work. And so it's not something that just happens to everyone. It is a disease of the brain. The biggest risk, the number one risk for developing Alzheimer's is age. And so the older we get, the more at risk that we are. 1 in 9 over the age of 65 here in our country has Alzheimer's disease.
Now, say that again. 1 in 9 over 60.
Over 65.
Over 65.
1 in 9 over 65 has Alzheimer's disease. Half of those over the age of 85 have Alzheimer's disease.
50% of those over 85 have Alzheimer's disease.
That's correct. And so I think probably the easiest way to try to describe it is if you can't find your keys, that's one thing. But if you find your keys and you don't know what they are and what they're supposed to do, that becomes a different question. That's where you start to look at and say, wait a minute. And so the question that we'll ask someone if they're asking those, sharing those kind of fears with us and asking those questions about themselves, is we'll say, is the things that you're seeing, are they starting to change and impact your ability to function in daily life? And if they say, no, it's occasional, I can't find my wallet or something like that. But if they're saying, yeah, I can't remember how the directions I'm supposed to drive to the grocery store that I've been to 1,000 times. Those are the kinds of things we start to say, okay, this is different than just simply, because there's a lot of things that can impact our memory, our whether or not we're forgetful, how busy we are. What kind of crisis or stress we may be under just in daily life, how much rest we're getting. Are we getting all the vitamins and all the things that our body needs, so overall health, that sort of thing. But when it comes to is the memory issues or the cognitive issues starting to impact whether or not you can function every day in and day out, that becomes a bigger question.
Talk about the distinction between dementia and Alzheimer's.
Sure. Well, if you think in terms of cancer, cancer is the umbrella term, and there are various forms of cancer that fall underneath that umbrella. So if someone has leukemia, they have cancer. If they have cancer, they don't necessarily have leukemia. Well, dementia is that umbrella term, and Alzheimer's is one of the 7 forms of dementia. So because we hear a lot from folks say, well, Mom has dementia, she doesn't have Alzheimer's, as if that is better than it's better to have dementia than Alzheimer's. But the reality is, if someone has Alzheimer's, they have dementia. But if they have dementia, they don't necessarily have Alzheimer's. Regardless of all that, the difference between the different forms of dementia is really how it attacks the brain, because the symptoms tend to be very similar to each other when it comes to cognition and their ability to communicate, and maybe it affects their behaviors. A lot of those symptoms tend to be very similar. And so actually our full name, our official name, is Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Association. that's a lot harder to fit onto a business card, so we kind of shrink it down. And so Alzheimer's has become the more common reference to every form of dementia, because actually about 70% of those, 70% of all those with dementia have Alzheimer's. It's easily the most prevalent form of the various dementias. So that's the best way to describe it for me.
How accurate is our ability to really diagnose if a family member has a little bit of a problem, and many times they're in talking with their general care family practitioner, say, Dad's having a lot of difficulty, or
Sure.
he may say about himself, I'm not remembering things like I used to. I find myself struggling for names and situation. The diagnostic tools to determine, is this really something that demands attention? Is it an indication of Alzheimer's, or is it just, as sometimes they jokingly say, the old-timers disease?
Right. Well, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, how accurate can it be to diagnose it? My answer then would be far different than it is now. But at that point in time, it was the reality is that 5 years ago the 100% way to diagnose Alzheimer's was through autopsy. There wasn't, everything else was far less accurate. But there had been breakthroughs in science to give us a much better understanding of the disease and what it is we're looking at. And so the diagnostic process, even though it's not just a simple blood test or anything like that, if you have a physician who understands that there needs to be several different disciplines in the diagnostic process of finding out what kind of dementia it is, then their ability to accurately say this is what Alzheimer's is, that this is Alzheimer's, has increased dramatically over just the last few years. And because of that understanding that we see the disease now, the more we understand about it, that's revealing so much more about where do we need to go in actually treating and possibly curing the disease some point in time.
Has your internal medicine or general practitioner really kept up with this, or is this something that needs to have a specialist to talk to somebody who is in that field? And what kind of a person would you go to discuss this situation?
Well, generally, usually the first place to go is, the first place people go is they go to their general practitioner, because that's the person they've known for several years. They have more confidence in them. They have more just trust in them. And if their GP is looking at it and saying, I'm not really sure, if it's a physician who really knows that this needs a little more needs to be looked at more closely, then they will most likely refer the patient to either a geriatrician, which there aren't very many of those. There's less than 30 here in the state of Oklahoma, and either a geriatrician or a neurologist. Those are the two most common referrals from a family medicine doctor. And the geriatrician and neurologist tend to just see this on a much more frequent basis, so they are more well versed and feel more comfortable in going through that process, that diagnostic process.
Is it important that it be diagnosed as quickly as possible? I mean, some things like cancer, we've had it drilled into us over and over. The quicker you discover it, the better the cure. Is Alzheimer's something that is simply going to follow a pattern, and knowing about it may create more anxiety and worry than to simply allow it to just continue its course until it creates a problem because they can't do anything about it? What's the status of treatment?
I can say absolutely. This is a very common question that we get, and I can say without hesitation, you have to treat Alzheimer's disease like you would any other disease. If you start to wonder, if you start to have questions, talk to your doctor, go through the process. If it isn't, then great. You figured out that there's something else going on. If it is, and you do it at the front end side of it, then your options of extending your quality of life go up. A good example is there's a gentleman that we've come in contact with. He was diagnosed at the age of 56 years old, and he was diagnosed very early on. And there's a few things that happened with that. One is that he got on the existing medications as soon as possible. And while those don't modify the disease, they do treat the symptoms. So it's helped keep those symptoms at bay for much longer. Two, he wanted to see what could be out there. So because they caught it early, then he was able to. He's actually gone through as a participant in 2 different clinical drug trials, and he's participated in those. And so he's been a part of that solution. And 3, it is because he caught it early and he was willing to go through that process. He has felt empowered to speak out, to be a voice, to let other people know. You're not out there by yourself. I'm one of you. He has met with our congressman. He has helped move things along. He has been very active in public policy efforts. When I first met him, it was 2007. That was 7 years ago, almost to the day, almost 7 years ago. And he is still doing very well. And I firmly believe it's because he got diagnosed early. He got on the medications from as early to as close to day 1 as possible. He went through the clinical trials. He has also taken a more holistic approach to his health and figuring out what are the kind of foods I want to eat, how healthy do I want to be, exercise, all those sorts of things. And he has approached Alzheimer's disease like most folks would if they were diagnosed with diabetes. He has said, I'm making a life change in how I approach things. And he really is the poster child for do you or do you not get diagnosed early on. We feel very, very strongly that it's only going to make things it's going to improve things the earlier that you go through the diagnostic process.
Mark, we've only got a minute. What is the probability that a 40-year-old will see Alzheimer's extinct before he reaches the age of 70?
Extinct, I don't know about extinct because cancer is not extinct.
Right.
And all these other diseases still exist. But a major breakthrough in treatment, I feel very, very confident. You said 40 years old. I don't think it's 40 years old. I feel more confident that someone who's 60 years old will see a breakthrough in their lifetime for how this disease is treated. And so that's where we are. We're on that cusp. There's some really good stuff happening in the Alzheimer's research field, and there's a reason to be hopeful, which is all the more reason why people should get diagnosed as soon as possible.
You got to say good news, world, as far as Alzheimer's disease is concerned. Mark, I appreciate your coming in so much. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. We've been visiting with Mark Freed. Mark is the president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association. Mark, if somebody wants to contact you, give them a phone number real quick.
They can give us a call at 800-272-3900. That's our helpline. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And or they can go onto our website at alz.org.
Okay, it's 800-272-3900. Mark, thanks so much for coming in. It's always good to have you. And in spite of the nature of the disease and the problems it causes, you brought some good news.
Excellent.
Hey, we got to go. Time's up. Thanks so much for being with us. Be sure and join me again this same time next week. Until then, be good to everybody you meet. Love somebody, especially yourself. See you next week. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find